All right, because I started this response trying to give you guys the information you need. You have so many questions. I'll just continue. I think it was on number 9. Who are the patients that would come to the hospital but not early enough? From where were they coming? So let me be clear about not early enough. They were coming to the hospital. I don't know necessarily where they were. It was not necessarily nursing homes. I mean, I had patients that many non-nursing home patients had a lot of I just remember a lot of fathers around 48 to 52 on vents. They probably almost came to almost all of them probably came to the emergency room. This is in New York City. But what I mean late enough is that the ICU is late. Most of the patients were getting admitted to the hospital wards. No treatment was being given. And then by the time they declined and went to the ICU, that's really late. I was trying to get hospitalists to start treating earlier before the ICU, but with rare exception, they weren't doing that. So I don't know. Hopefully that answers the question. You endorse the use of remdesivir. Yeah, remdesivir in the hospital is a joke of a drug. It doesn't work that late. There's very little viral replication going on then, but it has a profoundly positive early outpatient treatment trial, and so it looks like it has high efficacy if given early in symptoms, not late in the hospital. Are your spoken and written testimonies to the committee inclusive and representative of COVID patients you saw? Yes, they are. You indicated using Math Plus with little success, which are attributed to your late arrival. Yes, it's true. Is it possible that the patient you saw were chronically ill patients that were transferred from nursing home? No. I took care of taxi drivers and truck drivers. And I remember I even had a patient that got transferred to us from the tent in Central Park. They had set up they needed more capacity. There were patients on vents in this tent in Central Park. One person got referred to me there, but they were not chronically ill patients. I mean, come on, I'm a doctor. I do this all day long. There was all sorts of patients coming in. There was no common theme. If in fact, most of my memory is not of the elderly. Maybe the elderly died before they could get to the hospital. Most of them, I just remember 40s, 50s, 60s, even a couple of 30, people in their 30s. Along the same lines, a bit later in the interviews, when I was in New York, I saw nothing but what I would say were patient chronically ill with COVID. I didn't see acute. Well, when I say chronically ill with COVID, they were so far advanced in the disease, they'd been sick for days to weeks, and on ventilators, really prolonged ventilator durations. And that was the unit that I took over. I mean, like I said, it was the first unit to fill. Many other units had been built since then, and a lot of the patients there had been admitted days to weeks before. I had a couple of new admissions. I should say I had a handful of new admissions that month, but most of them were just the chronics on vents, chronic COVIDs on vents, chronic severe COVID on vents. By the time I left New York, we had no new cases. Yeah, exactly. There are just no new COVIDs that I saw. Yes. Does it strike you as odd that COVID cases have simply disappeared in a city of a I don't know what to say is odd or not. I know they came in waves and I don't understand. I'm not an epidemiologist. You guys are asking me questions. I can just give you my clinical experience and then you guys can figure out how to explain the data. I really, but the no new novel pathogen is so bonkers and out there. That's the only thing that I think you guys have to admit you're wrong and come up with a new theory to explain what you can't figure out with the data. Okay. But no new novel pathogens is just bonkers. I mean, I'm literally an expert in acute respiratory failure. I've never seen a pathogen like that. Flu and vaping, it's just a joke. I can't tell the difference between flu and this novel pathogen. Like I told you, flu doesn't come into my ICU ever, ever. When I say ever, I mean, I told you in my career, 4 or 5 cases of flu, and you guys said this is an influenza-like illness. Yeah, this is nothing like influenza. Do you think a formal inquiry of New York hospitals is warranted, if only on the basis? No, the hospitals, they just weren't being aggressive. No one was treating. They were doing supportive care only, and that was the terrible thing that they did. Have you considered the possibility that COVID patient designation is that? No, I could care less about the positive test. I took care of patients with negative tests who had COVID. You guys think that I'm like, only a positive test determines COVID. these patients were reproducibly appearing in patterns and certain distributions of abnormalities on the X-rays. I mean, it was really very reproducible the way they were presenting. They were getting severely ill. In fact, I think I put in one of my stories, Paul Marik saved some guy who had multiple negative tests, but was classic COVID and responded to Math Plus protocol. Remember, Paul was able to treat early. I mean, he treated right there in the emergency room, hospital, and before the ICU. Um, People were sick and dying from something else. They were dying from something else. You want to call it COVID or not? I don't care what you call it. I don't care about the PCR test. The disease was severe, reproducible, and there were massive numbers of patients, and they were filling and depleting ICU resources. I don't care what pathogen it was and what test it was, but the disease was absolutely reproducible. Was very severe and transmitted. Yeah, the first wave. These are very strong words for a flu-like illness. How confident are you that you were not observing the seeds that was staged or set up for you? You guys, that question tells me to end this interview. I don't talk with, this is so bizarre. Staged or set up for you? Patients coming to me, they're diaphoretic, sweating, they have x-rays and they're hypoxic. How is that staged? I mean, I've been taking care of patients my whole career. I was inundated trying to save patients' lives. Yes, it was all a big stage. What is that question? Perplexed as to why responsible people choose not to wear. In your recent response, something is preposterous, deliberate, widespread release. Yeah. I think on this question, I exhort you guys to read the book Wuhan Cover-Up and read about the history of bioweapons development and testing. They have been spraying and exposing significant portions and communities in the United States to biological weapons for about over 60 years. They've been doing this since the 1950s. So this idea that it could be a point release or they attack certain cities and release them is completely reasonable if you read that book. But you guys this was to me, it was a bioweapon and this is what happened. I don't care or know why New York got hit so hard. But you guys keep thinking that New York is so unique. My colleagues in Milwaukee got absolutely hammered. My colleagues in Detroit and Seattle and New Orleans, like, I don't know what the data is for there, but on the ground, a similar experience were being related by numerous clinicians around the country. I mean, I was on these huge WhatsApp groups with doctors all over the country. We were all seeing and saying the same thing. So why the data was so much an outlier, I don't know. But the reality was there were a lot of sick people entering hospitals with this disease. You seem there was a point release of SARS. No, I haven't shared my concerns with federal officials. I have no evidence for that. I just think it's it's a reasonable hypothesis. And if you look at the Wuhan, and by the way, have I shared my concerns with, how many concerns I've been sharing with the world and op-eds? I've written like 18 op-eds on numerous concerns. Nobody gives a shit. The federal government is captured. I'm not going to run to the federal government and present the hypothesis that I have no data to support. And they don't even listen to all the data that I am providing. If there was such a release, do you think it changes the WHO's March 11, 2020 pandemic declaration or your view thereof? Yeah, it does it change my view? Yes. I mean, I don't know what to make because I don't really know what happened. I don't know why it transmitted that way, why it spiked in certain places. But it was becoming a problem in numerous areas of the world. Yeah, I think it was reasonable to call an emergency because it was an emergency. I mean, we were getting overwhelmed. Do you think your early impressions of severity and threat and the transmission were warranted? So if this procession was driven largely by what you observed in New York, have you considered that what you saw as alternate explanations that don't involve? No. Period. End of story. No. This was clearly an infectious illness that was transmitted from person to person. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say. It does not change anything. Why it spiked, why it came in waves, why there were so many different variants, why there were different morbidities, mortalities. I don't have great answers to that. I am concerned about that Japanese paper that suggests that all of the Omicron variants are not naturally evolved, that they all must have come out of laboratories. So I don't know if some sociopath that just keeps releasing these variants. I don't know why they're releasing less dangerous variants. I have no idea. I don't have all the answers, but this idea that it was a huge vaping explosion or it was flu and I don't know what flu is and I'm mistaking everything for the flu. That's the only thing that I can't handle anymore. And I'm done talking about this. You guys can do whatever you want. Take my information the way you need it. But what I'm really worried about is that you guys will never admit that this was a novel pathogen, even though it was. You'll never admit it. You'll keep going on with your theories. And I wish you the best of luck, but this is all I can devote to this question. Thanks.